Humanity from the dark soil of the earth. We meet Adam, the first ever man created by the divine. Adam was placed in the enchanting Garden of Eden, a paradise brimming with lush trees, vibrant flowers, and a multitude of animals. Although this idyllic setting provided Adam with all he could desire, God recognized his solitude. In response, he fashioned Eve from one of Adam's ribs, ensuring that he would have a companion. Together, they were entrusted with the care of the garden, living in harmony with all living beings. Many people often wonder about the skin color of Adam and Eve, but evidence points to the likelihood that the original couple was actually black. The Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve resided, was located in Mesopotamia. This region is geographically close to both Africa and the Middle East. Given that Adam and Eve are considered the progenitors of all humanity, it stands to reason that they may have passed down their physical traits to the early populations of that region, who typically had darker skin, as evidenced by archaeological findings. Genetic variations leading to lighter skin tones emerged much later as human beings adapted to different environments. So, from the very beginning, black identity had already been present in the Bible, as black origins turned out to be the origin of all bloodline continued, and the biblical black narrative doesn't just stop there. The Bible tells of more figures in history whose identity was evidently black, and evidently remarkable. In the same book of Genesis, chapter 6, we go to the story of Noah, the 10th generation from Adam. He was the one chosen by God to build the ark and save his family and pairs of every animal species from the impending flood that would cleanse the earth of wickedness. After the flood, Noah's story continued as he became the progenitor of new nations. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These 3 sons were instrumental in the continuation of humanity and the expansion of nations. Shem is often associated with the Semites and Hebrews, with his descendants traditionally believed to be the Jews and the Arabs. Ham is commonly linked to African nations, with his descendants thought to include various groups in Africa, and Japheth is associated with the people of Europe and Asia, with his descendants believed to encompass many tribes and nations in those regions. But what if I told you that despite the distinctions among these 3 sons, they all had darker skin and that all nations were formed starting with darker skin? Research by Dr. Nathaniel Jensen revealed a pattern in the human metricton DNA that suggests the existence of 3 central nodes. These nodes indicate that the wives of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were likely the ancestral sources for all modern humans. Basically, mothers pass down metricton DNA to their children, which contains 16,569 base pairs, and mutations occur at a rate of approximately 1 every 6 generations. Through these findings, Jensen was able to arrange metricton DNA sequences from various populations into a tree-like diagram, confirming 3 distinct ancestral lines. From this information, it's completely plausible to say that we all came from people of color and through the years evolved to be the human beings we are today. So now, let's talk about how the 3 brothers from whom mankind originated were, in fact, men of color. Let's start with Shem, the ancestor of the Jews. Despite modern Jews being predominantly white, scientists discovered that Shem's white DNA is actually linked to a group called They, which is often associated with Afro-Asiatic people, a group that includes both Africans and people from the Middle East. From this information, and the fact that early populations of the world were indeed darker in skin tone, it's reasonable to say that Shem Jew had darker skin, which would also mean that Abraham, the father of all Jewish people, was a person of color as well, derived from his lineage from Shem. So now, we can conclude that Shem, the ancestor of the Jews, was indeed a person of color. Let's proceed to Noah's second son, Ham. Ham is historically recognized as a progenitor of the African race and is associated with haplogroups A and B, which are connected to the DNA of African populations. Ham had 4 sons, Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan, all of whom had a huge influence on early civilization. Cush settled in the south of Egypt and became the ancestor of the black Ethiopians. Mizraim became the father of the Egyptians, whose nation was part of Africa. Phut settled in northern Africa, and Canaan settled in ancient Palestine, which is a part of modern Turkey. Canaan then became the ancestor of the Canaanites. Now, before we move forward, let's first talk about a very important issue tied to Ham's black bloodline, and that is the curse of Ham, found in Genesis chapter 9 verse 22-27. The curse of Ham is often misunderstood. After the great flood, Noah became drunk and lay naked in his tent. Ham saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers, Shem and Japheth, who then covered Noah without looking at him. When Noah awoke and learned what Ham had done, he pronounced a curse on Ham's son, Canaan, saying that he would be a servant to his brothers. Over time, white scholars interpreted this curse to justify discrimination against black people, using it to rationalize the historical abuse and trading of black slaves. However, these white scholars failed to realize that all of humanity originated from black ancestry. It was only the thirst for power that divided nations. Canaan's descendants, the Canaanites, were eventually conquered by the Israelites, descendants of Shem's bloodline. In this way, Canaan's lineage did, in a sense, serve his brothers. However, the use of this story to justify the black slave trade is invalid, especially since humanity's origins trace back to darkest skin tones. We all share black ancestry within our lineage. At the same time, other scholars argue that any curse placed by a mere mortal in that era would have been as ineffective as it would be today. After all, while Noah directed the curse at Canaan, Canaan still went on to become the father of 7 prosperous nations, including the Canaanites, Phoenicians, and Sidonians. Now that we've cleared this common misconception, let's move to talk about Japheth's lineage. Japheth is often associated with populations in Europe and parts of Asia, where haplogroup C can be found. As such, Japheth is frequently seen as the progenitor of the white race. While some people believe this is sufficient reason to conclude that Japheth was fair-skinned, a substantial body of evidence suggests otherwise. Scientists have uncovered that light-skin pigmentation developed relatively recently in human history, approximately 4,000 to 10,000 years ago, primarily in populations living in northern latitudes. Meanwhile, the oldest human remains date to more than 200,000 years ago. This means that for a much longer period of time, light-skin pigmentation was not commonplace. Thus, despite Japheth being considered the father of the future white race, he would have been a person of color as derived from his genes. These 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, went on to produce even more remarkable figures, all of which were people of color. As mentioned earlier, Abraham, the father of all Jews, was a descendant of Shem, who was Afroasiatic. This makes Abram and all of his close descendants Semitic Hebrew Negros. That includes Isaac, the second patriarch of the Israelites, Jacob, the third patriarch whose 12 sons became the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, and Joseph, who rose to power in Egypt and was able to save his family from famine by bringing them there. After Joseph, there was Moses, who led the Israelites through the Promised Land. There was also Joshua, who oversaw the conquest of Canaan, Samson, who was known for his extraordinary strength and his battles against the Philistines, Gideon, a courageous judge who, with only 300 men, defeated the Midianites, and Samuel, the last of the judges and the prophet who anointed Israel's first kings. Following Samuel came Saul, the first king of Israel, chosen to lead the people. After Saul, there was David, the shepherd who defeated Goliath and became one of the most revered kings of Israel. David's lineage continued with his son Solomon, famed for his wisdom and wealth, who built the first temple in Jerusalem, solidifying it as the religious heart of the Israelites. Meanwhile, on the side of Ham, there were the Cushites, such as King Nimrod, known for their powerful empires, the Egyptians and their pharaohs, renowned for their advanced civilization, the Canaanites, such as the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, and many others. All of these remarkable and powerful ancestors of color led us to Jesus, the Son of God, who fulfilled the promises made to Abraham and David. Born from a line of David, Jesus came as the Messiah, embodying God's love and salvation for humanity. Known as the King of Kings, he taught compassion, healed the sick, and offered forgiveness to all. The truth is, even the great Jesus was a man born from color. All of them were, and all of us are. That's because we humans all started as one before nations became divided, and before appearances became a barrier to peace. The Bible doesn't just include Africa, it exalts it. African legacy, Black legacy is biblical legacy, not as a side story, but as an essential narrative woven deeply into the foundations of faith itself. The great figures of the Bible weren't just visitors to Africa. They were part of it, and Africa was part of them. A truth that resonates, inspires, and shows us that Black culture isn't merely historical, but eternal. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this wonderful journey. Now we have a better understanding of how the origins of mankind are actually rooted in Black history. And the truth is undeniable. People of color have always been present in the Bible. That said, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Is there something we missed or perhaps a personal perspective you'd like to share? Let us know in the comments below. Your input and time are deeply valued, and together, we can continue exploring these profound stories. Give us a like if you appreciated this narrative and subscribe so you can always be part of our insightful discussions. Thank you again and see you next time.